Number 10, the isolator. The last thing anybody wants to do after the almost 2 years we've had. Ugh. Though this looks like an object perfect for deep sea diving, it was actually built for desk work. Hugo Gernsback was a Luxembourgish American inventor, writer, editor, engineer, designer, businessman, and of course magazine publisher, because why not add one more thing to the list he's really good at. He started a magazine called Science and Invention, which encouraged scientific and amateur experimentation. This was one of the inventions published in the magazine and was revealed in July 1925. The main purpose was to block out all of the noise from the surrounding environment, narrow the field of view like horse blinders to improve concentration. But don't worry, there was an oxygen tube attached to help out the studier, so you know you could breathe while you're reading about Shakespeare or something. Number 9, kangaroo boxing. Link here. This next one looks pretty self-explanatory, but also it's very confusing at the exact same time. Kangaroo boxing actually became pretty popular in the 1800s. In both Europe and the United States, clowns and professional boxers would square off against marsupials in front of herds of people. It was actually started by a university professor just like as a joke, and then it really caught on. Who they cheered for? One can't be certain. The man in the above photograph was sparring against a kangaroo in Germany in 1924. Obviously, the sport did not continue as it was considered abusive to animals who clearly had no idea why this hairless being was all up in their space and trying to beat them up. I don't understand, this is just ridiculous. Number 8, children shipped in the mail. Picture here. Sounds ridiculous, is ridiculous. But did it happen? Of course it did. However, this picture was actually staged, but this actually did happen. Imagine your sister calling you and telling you your nephew is visiting, and then minutes later the doorbell rings and your nephew is just like chilling with some packing peanuts in a cardboard box. Well, not quite. The postman had to play a kind of babysitter a bit. Shortly after package delivery, a revolutionary thing on its own, was introduced, a couple in Ohio sent their infant son to their grandmother's via postman in 1913. It cost 15 cents plus $50 insurance. Once this oddball story got out, the trend caught on. Regulations were vague about what you could and could not send via post, so why take a bus when you could take a postman? Rural townships also usually knew their postmen really well, so they'd be like, oh come on Joey, here's 15 cents, take little Timmy to my aunt's, I don't know. So they trusted them, they weren't just passing them off to strangers. However, eventually new regulations came out banning the practice. Finally, because it's just weird. Number 7, mummies for sale. Considering the frenzy that people get into when archaeologists discover a new mummy, you might be surprised to learn that this picture is actually a street merchant selling mummy merchandise of actual mummy. During the Victorian era in the 1800s, Napoleon's conquest opened the gates of Egypt to the Europeans, making mummies a really hot commodity. Like imagine somebody uncovering your aunt and going, ooh, we could sell her. Weird, right? Like 1,000 years from now? They could be purchased from street vendors, just as you see from this photo. The Euro elite used to even have mummy unwrapping parties, which is exactly as it sounds and not what you would expect people to do with a corpse. But even weirder than that, people actually thought ground up mummies had medicinal properties. It was so popular that it even instigated a counterfeit trade to meet the massive demand for magic mummy ground stuff. What did the counterfeit trade involve? The flesh of beggars instead of mummies. All that behind one picture. Number 6, half and half. This next one actually has a kind of sad story behind it, but paints a very clear picture of the division between Catholics and Protestants, and actually just religion in general. This picture depicts 2 graves in the Netherlands, one belonging to a Protestant and the other a Catholic. In 1842, a 22-year-old Catholic noblewoman fell passionately in love with a 33-year-old commoner, a colonel in the cavalry who was also Protestant, a big no-no. Their marriage was a total scandal, but they said screw you to their peers and stayed together for 40 years. The woman's husband died in 1880, and to forever unite them, she built a grave that would forever keep them together even though they were apart by a wall. The old cemetery was strictly divided into Catholic, Protestant, and Jewish sections, so these two monuments were built so they could forever be together. Does anybody have a tissue? Number 5. Leo the lion! Believe it or not, you've seen this lion before. In fact, you've probably seen him many times while watching your favorite films as a kid and even now. The lion in the photo is the one, the only, Leo the lion, the majestic beast who roars the MGM logo, like the old one. Leo the lion was the regular star of MGM since it was founded in 1924. The first MGM lion was called Slats, not Leo, and he actually didn't roar, he was just kind of like looking around. It was more like a gif. But Leo is actually the most familiar roar, like everybody knows what he sounds like. But who is the man having tea with such a lion? Well, that of course is Alfred Hitchcock, the king of thrills. This photo was taken in 1957 of the two legends posing to enjoy a hot cup of British tea. Number 4. Walter Yeo. Though the picture itself is a little disturbing, it signifies a life-changing moment for Mr. Walter Yeo and also for thousands more. This was one of the world's first plastic surgery procedures. Walter Yeo had suffered a dreadful accident while manning the guns on the HMS Warspite during World War I. He lost both his upper and lower eyelids in the event. A year later, however, he met Sir Harold Gillies, who would be considered the father of plastic surgery. His idea was to take skin from another part of Yeo's body and place it over the area in like a mask-like shape, as you can see in the photo. Dr. Gillies then went on to carry out the surgery on 5,000 injured men from June 1917 onward. And thanks to his work, thousands of people have benefited since the years of the war. Yeo himself lived until he was 70 years old. Number 3. The Dynasphere. The car of the future that really never made it there, and we can see why. Every car we have today has 4 wheels, not just one. Some have more than that now, it's getting confusing. But in the 1930s, J.H. Purvis had a vision. He called it the Dynasphere. It was a large wheel with a cabin in the center for the driver and the passenger to sit. Funny enough, it did actually work. Check this out. But did anyone else notice the problem with driving it? Yeah. You have to drive like Ace Ventura with his window open because it broke, you know what I mean, that scene? Exactly. In order to see past the giant wheel spinning in front of you, you have to kind of rubberneck it out to the side. JH made 2 prototypes, one ran on gasoline and the other ran on electricity. He even designed a kind of bus version that could fit more passengers, but it still needed mini stabilizer wheels, so it had like 6 by the end of it. Do I kind of want one though, because it looks fun? Absolutely. Would I want to take it on a road trip across Canada? Absolutely not. Number 2. The Hindenburg disaster. Based off the title, you already know that this is a picture of the Hindenburg disaster because I already said it. Spoiler alert. The Hindenburg was the largest dirigible ever built and it was the pride of World War II. Yeah, see, Germany, you know which one I'm talking about. But YouTube gets mad. The first successful airship was constructed in 1852 by Henry Giffard, but the problem was he used hydrogen. This made both French and German designs of the craft susceptible to explosions if something went wrong. Hence, Exhibit A. What you are seeing in the photo is the direct aftermath of a devastating accident. On May 6, 1937, the dirigible touched a mooring mast in Lakehurst, New Jersey, sparking the explosion, which took the lives of 13 passengers and 21 crew members. Something as simple as a small spark from the engine ignited the hydrogen core, and the craft fell 200 feet to the ground in flames. And last but not least, number 1, spectators. This is the photo taken at the trial of Al Capone. Yeah, it suddenly makes a lot of sense as to why people are covering their faces. When someone says to you 1930s gangster, Al Capone probably jumps into your head. He was deemed public enemy number 1 by the US government for bootlegging and other illegal rackets during Prohibition. The terror the ruthless gangster incited in the city of Chicago is evident by this image. Witnesses and spectators of the trial covered their faces so they wouldn't be recognized by Capone's vengeful accomplices or Capone himself. Behind those fedoras may lie other criminals yet to be unmasked, or civilians scared of a Tommy gun waking them up at night. Either way, you know he must have been one terrifying dude. Authorities did everything they could to catch him, but he would always slip right through their fingers. Finally, his reign came to an end in 1931 when they caught him on income tax evasions of all things that landed him an 8-year sentence.
Starting off this list in our number 10 spot, we have the eruption of Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens is a stratovolcano located in Skamania County, Washington. This volcano is best known for its huge and disastrous eruption on May 18, 1980. This photograph comes from photographer Robert Landsberg, who of course was in the area at the time of the eruption. Before the eruption, he had visited the area in order to photograph and document all of the changes that were happening. On May 18th, he was within a few miles of the volcano when it erupted. Since he unfortunately was located so close to the explosion, he knew he would be unable to escape this disaster, so instead of focusing on the impossible, he focused on taking as many pictures as possible. Robert was obviously incredibly brave and dedicated, but also very smart. After snapping as many photos as he could, including this one, he then secured his camera in his backpack and covered his backpack with his body. He knew he was unlikely to survive, but wanted to make sure that these photos did. His body was found 17 days later with his backpack still underneath him. His film was of course developed and has provided geologists with some really valuable insights with his close documentation of the eruption. In our number 9 spot today, we have the core. This photo shows a physicist named Harold Agnew, and while this looks like a relatively normal, non-threatening photo, what he has in his hand is truly devastating. Harold is holding the nuclear core of what was nicknamed the Fat Man atomic bomb. This means that Harold is holding the nuclear core of the atomic bomb that was later dropped on Nagasaki in 1945. The immediate blast, of course, took many lives, but so did the long-term effects of the bomb, like radiation illness and that sort of thing. It's crazy to look at a photo like this because it seems just so perfectly normal when he literally has a life-changing, world-ending device in the palm of his hand. Also, I don't think I could ever hold something like that. Not only would I just not want to, but I would just be so afraid that something was gonna go wrong. In our number 8 spot today, we have the Challenger crew. This is a photo that was taken of the clearly very excited Challenger crew as they walked down the ramp ready to head off on their mission. The crew even included 37-year-old Krista McAuliffe, who was a high school social studies teacher. She had won a spot on this mission through a program with NASA called the Teacher in Space program, and she had trained diligently for months in order to be the first non-military person in space. On January 28, 1986, the Challenger mission proved to be fatal just 73 seconds after liftoff. 2 rubber O-rings failed because of the cold temperatures of the morning, and on live television, the world watched as the spacecraft broke apart and plunged into the ocean, sadly taking the lives of everyone on board. It is an absolutely tragic event made even more chilling by this final photo. In our number 7 spot today, we have the plague. This photo comes from the 19th century, from the third plague pandemic. This was the first time that the plague had spread to all 5 continents. While we now know something about what that might have been like, what we haven't had to endure are the doctors that dressed like this. This is a photo of the outfits and masks that plague doctors wore when they would come to your house to treat or diagnose you. The long beak-like noses of the masks are very creepy, but they were used to hold herbs and other nicely scented things because they believed that it would help ward off the bad air, which at the time is what they thought was causing the sickness. A pandemic certainly is bad enough. Thankfully, our doctors and nurses are just sticking to scrubs. In our number 6 spot today, we have the elephant's foot. This photo looks like it's just a big lump of nothing, but it's called an elephant's foot. Don't worry, at first I was a little worried too, but it has nothing to do with elephants and is only named that because of its appearance. This lump was actually created from the Chernobyl nuclear meltdown, and it is just a mass of corium and other materials that were in the core of the reactor. This elephant's foot was located in the steam distribution corridor, which is under what's left of the reactor. While this mass doesn't produce as much radiation as it did before, it does still, to this day, produce a deadly amount. It is said that if you stood in front of it for just 300 seconds, that would be enough to get a lethal dose of radiation. It's kind of crazy that even though they knew this, they were still standing there taking pictures of it. But I'm just glad because we all now get to see it, and it gives us just a little more insight into what exactly happened that day. In our number 5 spot today, we have Mount Pinatubo. This is a photo that is showing Mount Pinatubo, which is located in the Philippines Philippines on June 15, 1991. That is the day that this volcano erupted into what would be the second largest volcanic eruption of the 20th century. Certainly impressive, also extremely terrifying. This photo shows the pyroclastic flow full of hot gas and rock being flung into the air. Eruptive activity in the volcano first started on April 2nd of that year, which prompted researchers to set up seismographs in the area. By June, the volcano was having a group of progressively shallower eruptions before, on June 12th, the volcano had its first spectacular eruption, which sent an ash column 19 kilometers up into the atmosphere. After more highly gas-charged magma reached the surface on June 15th, the volcano once again exploded, this time sending the cloud of ash 40 kilometers up into the atmosphere. Volcanic ash and pumice blanketed the surrounding area, and pyroclastic flows filled what were once deep valleys with fresh volcanic deposits. It was truly magnificent and extremely powerful, and this photo shows just that. In our number 4 spot today, we have the Pioneers' Defense. This photo is known as the Pioneers' Defense, and man, does it ever look creepy. This photo comes from 1937 and it was taken by a Russian photographer named Viktor Bulla. This photo takes place in the Leningrad area, which is now known as St. Petersburg, which is the second largest city in Russia. The people in this photo were part of a group that was the 1930s Russian equivalent of our Boy Scouts, and it was called the Young Pioneers. The masks on their faces leave a very eerie feeling, and for a fair reason. These people were doing a military preparation drill, which is the reason for the gas masks. This photo was taken during a time where the country was under the dictatorship of Joseph Stalin, and the residents were constantly unsure of what was going to happen. The country was already seeing death, and people were already frightened just a few years before the start of World War II. In our number 3 spot today, we have the lipstick. This is a photo that comes to us from December 10th, 1945. If looking at this image gives you a shudder down your spine, that absolutely makes sense, as it was written by a terrible person known as the Lipstick Killer. This photo is an image of a note he left written on the wall at one of his crime scenes. The photo comes from the apartment of Frances Brown, as just before he wrote this message, he took her life. After this message was left, he ended up taking the life of one other person before he was finally caught by police 6 months later. The message scrawled in the photo reads, quote, "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." It is an absolutely chilling note with a horrifying backstory. In our number 2 spot today, we have the acid drum. This photo comes to us from inside the house of another terrible person, the serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer, made very famous recently. This photo was taken from the inside of his home after he was found out and caught by authorities. Before his arrest, he was sadly able to take the lives of 17 different people. Although this photo might look kind of plain, the horrors are plentiful. This shot shows a drum full of acid that was located inside of his home. Probably don't really need to tell you what it was used for. I can't imagine the horrors investigators saw when they entered his home, and even previous to that as they investigated his crimes. Thankfully, Jeffrey was caught, and in 1992 he was sentenced to life in prison, but just 2 years later he was killed by a fellow prison inmate. In our number 1 spot today, we have the Dyatlov Pass incident. If you have never heard of the Dyatlov Pass incident, you better buckle in because it is so terrifying. This photo was taken in February of 1959 as 9 young Soviet hikers sent out to trek through the Ural Mountains. They had set up a camp, and sometime during the night, something happened that made them cut their way out of the tent and all flee the site. Leaving in such a rush, they were of course underdressed for the bitterly cold weather, and 6 of them ended up passing away from hypothermia, which is extremely tragic. The other 3, however, is where this story takes an even more frightening turn. Like I mentioned before, no one knows why they fled the tent in the first place, and the last 3 hikers were found passed away with severe signs of physical trauma that no one agreed on what had caused it. In 2019, the investigation was reopened, and just last year there was a conclusion that a kind of avalanche called a slab avalanche was the cause for these injuries. Before you come at me in the comments, I know that not everyone is convinced that's what happened, and I don't blame you. It's really strange. So, down below in the comments, let me know what you think. Let's solve this mystery once and for all together in the YouTube comments. Regardless of what happened, this whole incident was of course very tragic, but the mystery behind it definitely takes it to a very spooky place.
Starting off with S for secrets. Alrighty, so here is from the Polish Constitution Day celebration in Chicago, specifically the one from 1978. On the left there, all washed out and crappy old flash display style, is First Lady Rosalind Carter. The guy shaking her hand, or rather just holding it and staring off camera like a waiter just went by with a tray of warm sausage rolls he wants to really get into, is John Wayne Gacy. And if you're also thinking, yo, what is up with this guy being in so many random famous photos, you're absolutely right, and it's genuinely strange how photographed and out there Gacy was. By the time this was taken, he had already killed over 20 people. Also, when he wasn't side hustling as a clown, he was super active in the government and politics, thus why wearing the S on the lapel. It was given to him by the Secret Service to indicate special security clearance. So the S literally does stand for secrets, both the US government's and his own. Whose secrets are worse though, huh? Anyways, at the bottom of the handshake photo, you can see the handwritten address to John Gacy, best wishes, Rosalind Carter. I've heard beauty is pain, but I haven't heard beauty is the next Saw movie? Check out the Beauty Calibrator. Seeing pictures, you may think it's some sort of Middle Ages torture machine, or as said, literally one of those Saw movie head devices. But surprisingly not, it's another way to point out women's insecurities and find the smallest things possible to make them feel bad over. Meet the Max Factor Beauty Calibration Machine. It is the only one in existence, thank God, and in 1932 the makeup legend Max Factor came up with this ingenious invention combining phrenology, cosmetics, and insecurity gaslighting with pseudoscience analysis of a woman's physical flaws. Max Factor's Beauty Calibrator enabled Hollywood makeup artists to pinpoint where facial corrections needed to be made down to a literal fraction. The machine, also known in the trades as the Beauty Micrometer, revealed that a natural perfect face was a myth. Every single woman was imperfect and needed correction, and this machine could find it by taking precise measures. It would mark spots that needed to be fixed, and then the artist, once the helmet was removed, could correct all the new insecurities with makeup that you didn't have before you put the stupid thing on. Next up is a photo that's all dramatic flair, the death card. Masseria represented an outdated mindset in the mafia world, one that could no longer be reasoned with diplomatically. The same is true of his rival Maranzano. The ongoing tit-for-tat killing between the two genuinely wreaked havoc on not only the streets but in the mafia hierarchy itself. Those resistant to change generally don't last long, and meetings of the mafia elite tried to bring around at the end of bloodshed, but Maranzano especially consistently manipulated matters to his own advantage. In order to facilitate underworld peace, the consensus turned from diplomacy to the inevitable. One of these guys had to go. The final straw, according to the accountant Nicola Gentile, was when the police informants called Masseria and said knock off the violence. Having an idealism for peace, he actually responded by disarming his men, and they were all pissed. Joe the boss, Masseria, his bodyguards, and Lucky Luciano all met at a seafood restaurant at 3 p.m. on April 15th of 1931. Luciano excuses himself from the card game while that they're playing to visit the bathroom. This is the signal for the hitmen. The bangs could be heard from around the block apparently, as Joe was hit from behind 4 times in the back and 1 in the head. And it's born, the infamous Ace of Spades shot. It added to the cult status of this hit, but many expect that the Ace of Spades card was placed between Masseria's fingers after the hit by a photographer just for the shock factor of the press. Next is a series of photos recovered before they could be lost. Holes in a window. Former LAPD reserve officer turned photographer Merrick Morton was faffing around in the LA Police Department when he comes across a stash of LAPD crime photos ranging in the dates of 1920s all the way to the 1970s. These were cellulose nitrate based film, and the negatives were so decomposed they're deemed fire hazard, but Merrick saw enough of the few stills to know that they'd be an absolute effing gold mine. Working with Phototeca Photo Digitation Service and the US National Film Archive, the photos were given a new life. This collection is NSFW, and there are hundreds. Now spruced up, the macabre photos are mostly crimes, and many of them violent and depicting the bodies or surviving victims' injuries. Obviously the ones you're seeing on screen as I'm talking are tamer, such as my choice, the one you're seeing now, holes in the car window. Something about it gives me a deep sense of discomfort, thus the choice. The collection contains recognizable crimes and faces too, an unusual photo of Malaya Nurmi dressed as Vampira, pictures of comedian Lenny Bruce's OD in March of 1966, and images of the Manson family arriving at their arrangement in 1970. Every photo is scary, and every single has a disturbing backstory. Some captions are provided by author James Elroy in his book LAPD 53. You can win, but sometimes you still lose in the end. It's the devastated Disneys. Meet Howard Ashman and Alan Menken. There are some everyday photos of these two in in their prime. Who were they? In case you couldn't tell by all the Disney crap in the background of said photos, they played somewhat of a big role. You know, writing the lyrics and music for Oliver and Company, The Little Mermaid, Aladdin, and Beauty and the Beast, as well as a few others. Also, not to mention creating the Little Shop of Horrors, which got them hired by Disney in the first place. And in this photo you see now, they had just won the Oscars for The Little Mermaid. Hooray! But why does Ashman look so unhappy? This was his life's accomplishments. It's because that night Ashman told Menken they needed to have a serious talk when they got back to New York, and when they get back a few days later, Ashman admits that he has HIV that's quickly progressed and he's going to die soon, and fast. They had been songwriting partners for over a decade and were in the middle of working on Beauty and the Beast, and despite the illness, Ashman completed the lyrical work and the initial work on Aladdin. On the morning of March 14, 1991, he does die from heart failure caused by his condition. At the time of his death, he only weighed 80 pounds, he'd lost his sight and could barely speak, and a voice that spoke so eloquently through song was lost forever. Before he passed, however, Disney Productions scrambled to finish the film so he could see a screening of it. The film earned Ashman and Menken 3 1991 Academy Award nominations for Best Song, and the title song winning the award. Perhaps most amazingly, Beauty and the Beast was the first animated film ever nominated for an Academy Award for Best Motion Picture. So it looks like a photo of two men achieving their wildest dreams, but it's a record of their last normal moment together. Oh look, it's the D-Bags Day Off! Camp staff! Check out this jolly-go-lucky group. They got the day off of work because the weather was nice for the first time in a long time. During the wartime, that must have been awesome, especially being young. Finally shirk responsibility, maybe go get a pint, have a picnic, hang out with each other, maybe get a little frisky, lavishing in the sun. I'm done looking at them. In fact, I'm sick by having to look at them. When that group of people isn't to have lighted and silly summer fun on a day off, they're going back to their jobs at the camps of World War II to do exactly what you're thinking they would be doing for work when I say they work at the camps of World War II. And they enjoyed it. This wasn't one of those mandatory war jobs or excuses you can make up for following orders. These young adults, who may as well be the grandmothers, grandfathers, or great-grandma or pa of people even watching, chose to do this job and actively enjoyed it. So this is a good reminder it's not that far in the past, and these people most likely took lives shortly before or after this photo was taken. Did Halloween come early, or is it just Sylvester Claus? Yeah, so I chose this photo out of, trust me, like thousands of equally creepy ones because I feel it truly captures the what the bleep factor this holiday has. And they do it every 31st of December to 13th of January. The Sylvester Clausen of Ernach and the surrounding area Appenzell custom that is famous throughout Switzerland. The custom derives its charm from the unique blending of contrasts such as nature and art, mystery and tradition, harmony and anarchy. The Sylvester Claus that ushered the old year out and ring in the new. There are 3 types of these clauses: the beautiful, the ugly, and the pretty ugly. Common to all the clauses are bells in various shapes and sizes that they wear on their bodies. Their rituals begin in the early morning each day. The various Schupel meet at the village square before each group goes its own way. A group will pull up in front of your house, then hop around and jump up and down to make the bells ring, and then they start yodeling at you. You listen to the yodel, they say Happy New Year, give you some cash, some liquor you have to drink from a straw, and then they just leave. Dark backstory gossip, however, in times of poverty and hunger, which afflicted the region frequently, Clausen was a way to earn a little extra money, and in the 1930s, what was known as Belchel Claus, aka the Beggar Claus, began to appear on the streets. Essentially homeless Santa Clauses, but Santa looked like that. As a result, the influx of beggars in the Claus Guide resulted in heavy restrictions, and in the 1950s, the custom had nearly died out. It's only thanks to the initiative of individuals in the 1970s that this got to come back and enjoys enormous popularity today. Somebody come get their creepy uncle. Cannot tell me this isn't the energy this photo gives. Creepy uncle. The woman is unidentified, but definitely a follower to be able to handle that guy's BO and greasy hands on her. It was taken of the Children of God leader, David Berg. This group started in 1968 in California after Berg claimed God himself had gifted him with prophecies. In reality, Berg started making extreme demands of his followers, give up their money, worldly possessions in exchange for limited outside access, horrible cramped living conditions, brainwashing, and would make this group famous for really bad reasons I can't and would rather not get into. Former members of COG have been outspoken about the childhood they suffered growing up in the communes. Actress Rose McGowan, the most famously outspoken, published her story of 9 years in the group. Actors Joaquin and River Phoenix, also raised in the cult, had it harder than Rose, and that trauma plagued River especially. He was actually the original heartthrob of the 80s and 90s, a role, fun fact, DiCaprio only managed to take once River's substance addiction caused by his traumatic childhood unfortunately took his his life. So more of an unfun fact, but the matter stands that River painted the way for DiCaprio, and this psycho ruined a lot of people's lives. Have you ever seen a photo you can feel? Before you see the photo itself, you're gonna learn about the man in it. So, Joseph Goebbels, a National Socialist politician and propagandist who held multiple high-rank roles in the Yahtzee party. As a party chief for Greater Berlin, 1926 to 45, Reich leader of propaganda, 1929 to 45, and in 1933, the push-broom mustache twit appointed Joseph the Minister for Propaganda and Public Enlightenment. He was a devout, unbridled through and through bigot, a tireless agitator, and the propaganda this man designed, wrote, and funded had shipped through dozens of countries and shaped the perspective of Jews in a way that can actually never be undone. It's this propaganda many people still cite when asked for factual basis or logical argument as what Jews had done oh so wrong. It's Joseph who orders the mass burning of literature, who sentenced thousands to death, and who made up lies to ensure hatred, a hatred that still stands today. And I want you guys to see how he looked at them. So here is the photo, finally. This is a picture of Joseph Goebbels taken only seconds after he found out the photographer was Jewish. In this photo, you can feel it, and it's effing terrifying. And now, the last photo is from El Monte, 6 May. That's the date written on this photo from the LAPD Collective, and it's the only other photo from said collection I chose to put on this list aside from the holes in the car window. As follows is the photo and James Elroy's written description of it. This is a detective modeling a mask worn by Baxter Shorter's crew. Shorter was in a gaggle with Emmett Perkins, Jack Santos, and Barbara Graham. The three of them then killed an old woman named Mabel Monahan on 9 March 1953. Shorter was appalled by his gaggle's violence. He ratted the others out, and Santo and Perkins kidnapped him in front of his pad on Bunker Hill, took him to the mountains, and killed him. Shorter had a sister that lived in El Monte, and they were hunting through it for evidence. This mask was in her pad. James Elroy. If Mabel Monahan's former son-in-law Tudor Scherer hadn't been a Las Vegas gambler, the 60-year-old widow probably would have never been killed. Also, if she didn't stay friends with him after he divorced her daughter, that'd probably have helped. But she did, and people found that weird. So there had to be something at play, right? Maybe Scherer trusted her so much he stored his 100 grand floats there. Ex-cons Emmett Perkins, John True, and Jack Santos think that, and they plan to take it. Barbara Graham joins the group to be their key into the door. Mabel takes a while to open up, but Barbara persuades her with the story of a broken down car and pleas for the phone. Mabel was reluctant, but the young woman was alone, and the widow knew firsthand how scary it could be for a woman to be on her own at night, so she let her in. And in comes John True, Jack, Emmett, wearing rubber masks. We're gonna take a pause. Ladies and female presenters, our own sex does not guarantee our safety, and you can't predict anyone's intentions. Please trust your gut if it says don't open that door. Mabel is struck on the head, left gagged and bleeding in the hallway. The group ransacks her home for a safe that never exists and panic when there is none, so they just leave her there. Mabel is dead for 2 days in her home before she's found. The investigation into the slaying of the Burbank widow began, and it was a long one, filled with drama. In the end, the four are charged with conspiracy to commit burglary, robbery, and M-word on June 3rd, 1953, in the death of Miss Mabel Monahan.
Number 10, the Cube. Alright, Transformers fans, let's do this. I feel like we're hearing more about these things like UFOs or UAPs, whatever you want to call them now. I feel like we're hearing about them now more than ever. So, why not kick this weird list off with something off-world? We have to include some alien cover-ups, right? It's me, it's Taylor, why not? I figured that I'd find one that's also not too well known. We haven't seen this one, you know, on YouTube all the time. Not too long ago, this spinning cube-looking craft or drone or something, it was spotted over Missouri, just lurking in the same spot, just hovering, and then it would zoom off. Folks could see it with their naked eye on the ground. It was also pretty obvious. It was eye-grabbing, it was shiny in the sky. Only a couple hours later, it was seen again, but this time it was 700 miles away. This time it was 44-year-old Matthew Jandeka, and he was minding his own business, hanging out on the porch, just doing his, you know, Sunday stuff, when this cube, again, this floaty cube, caught his attention. It was a sunny day, the light reflecting off the cube caught his eye, but then a day later, another guy, 30-year-old Justin Johnson, he saw the same thing, but this time he saw it while he was driving home, which is also pretty distracting. The light and the reflections also caught his eye. He says, "At first I thought maybe it was a balloon, but the movements were too odd." In a world full of deepfakes, I mean, do we believe this account? Is this real? Lately everyone's talking about how these UFOs are spheres, so maybe this video is that of a sphere. not a cube. That's cool. I love teaching geometric shapes via alien aircraft. I'm like, this is a triangle. We saw this one in the Navy, and we saw this cube in the sky. Number 9, Amityville photo. Okay, we'll go less UFOs, more ghosts. One M. Night Shyamalan theme to the other. Here we go. This photo was taken inside the actual Amityville house back in 1976. It's a young man, it appears, with glowing white eyes. How comforting is that? Pretty hard to miss there. He's got the glowing. Yep, looks very Sin City of him, just to stare with those white eyes. Now, at first, I thought this was from a horror movie, right? All those Amityville knockoffs. It looks obviously fake or set up in some way, until you start to read about the details here. See, this photo, it was taken with automatic cameras equipped with infrared, not an actual person. So, this young lad here probably wasn't expecting a selfie. Why I wasn't smiling or throwing up a peace sign. Makes sense now. Photographer Gene Campbell set up the photo and took it back in 1976. Now, at the time, Gene was working with paranormal investigators Ed and Lorraine Warren on the actual case. I'm scared now. This photo was revealed 3 years after it was taken on the Merv Griffin show, and many believe this is the ghost of John DeFeo, one of the victims in 1974. Now, you can't really do this anymore, right? You can't whip out photos from a otherwise crime scene and be like, okay gang, what do we think? Spirit or not a spirit? Vote? Yes? No? Obviously there was backlash after this for obvious reasons, but it took 3 years for that photo to reach the public eye, and now everybody believes in ghosts, or they do a little more than they did before that show. This was long before the Conjuring movie as well, obviously, so this was quite random to see on TV. Do you believe in ghosts? What's the ratio here? Comment down below. I'm not a believer, I'm not gonna lie. I've tried numerous times. I got the Ouija board, did the whole thing. Felt nothing, man. Like an 18-year-old on Christmas. I'm like, is that it? Is it done? Do I have to feel anything anymore? Number 8, Alfred Hitchcock and the MGM Lion. All right, you're gonna hear me roar after this one. This photo was from 1958. You've seen this at some point, right? Hopefully, or else, you know, we'll send over a VHS, we'll help you out. It was taken by Clarence Sinclair Bull. Now, the photo appears to be, well, no, it doesn't appear to be at all. It's Alfred Hitchcock serving tea to a lion. Yeah, the famous MGM lion. His name's Leo. That's him. There he goes. He's getting tea. He loves suspense and tea. Who would have thought? And company, it appears. North by Northwest was the only film that Hitchcock did with MGM. So there's a rumor now that he directed The Lion's Roar for the MGM intro, which is fun. But you're also like, okay, that's a real animal. That's sad. And also, that's probably nonsense. There have been 7 MGM lions in total. Yeah, not just one. But Leo was known to be the most friendly. I want to hear about the other 6. I'm like, what happened there? He's still in the logo today, but again, back in the 1950s, it's hard to say what it was really like on set. I mean, it's still a lion being held down for a photo, so probably wasn't a friendly vibe for that fella. Number 7, Gloria Steinem. Oh, here we go, a scandalous one. Back in 1963, the Playboy Club in New York City was booming. It was one of Hugh Hefner's greatest accomplishments at the time. This club was the talk of the town. That is until Gloria Steinem came in and started reporting some stuff. Gloria was a feminist writer. She's an icon. She created Miss Magazine back in 1972, but her career began much earlier, around the 60s. See, she got a job as one of these Playboy bunnies, you know, must be a comfortable getup. And she worked at the club undercover, secretly taking note on how this key holders only establishment was operating, right? Cool, what's going on here? What's the big scoop here? The staff were these young women, these beautiful young women, these bunnies. They had to wear the black bodysuits, the puffy white tails, the whole getup. And at age 28, Gloria worked undercover there for 3 weeks straight. And the piece she released after, appropriately titled A Bunny's Tale, great title, by the way, she nailed that one. It got so much attention that it kickstarted her freelance career and also made her a feminist icon. This photo of Gloria undercover shows you the comfortable work outfits she had to endure just to get the story out. Yeah, doesn't look like she had her non-slips on there. That's a write-up in my books. In a collection of her writings, Gloria reflects on the undercover piece, saying that it now has outlived all of the Playboy clubs, both here and abroad. That was before Hefner passed away in 2017, so I will add that you also outlived him as well. Good, he wasn't a very nice lad. Let's move on. Number 6, North Sentinel Island. All right, we got some people, some aliens, some ghosts. What else do we need, Taylor? How about some weird islands? Sure. North Sentinel Island. We gotta head over to India for this one. This island is the home of the Sentinelese tribe. You've probably heard about this at some point. One of the most forbidden islands in the world. But why? Located in the Bay of Bengal, North Sentinel Island is about 1,200 kilometers away from India. And while most islands are shrinking, this one actually grew back in 2014. Yeah, the universe is like, more. Yeah, you need more of this, sure. The island lifted up a couple meters during an earthquake, so the west and south sides, they gained an extra kilometer. Nice. DLC unlocked. The inhabitants on this island are among the few uncontacted tribes left in the world. They have apparently been there for 50,000 years, and there's no sign of agriculture or even fire. Yet somehow this tribe has thrived for ages. Now, if we try and get close, they will try and drive anybody away. More than fair. Like, we have enough room. We're good. Let's just leave. In fact, back in 2006, 2 fishermen sadly lost their lives because they got too close to the island without knowing who was on it or what the island was. Yeah, you can't just approach random islands. You gotta do some homework. That's why I'm here. Number 5, Lascaux Cave. If you didn't visit this cave back in 1963 or sooner, well, you lost your chance because, well, humans ruin everything. Now we can't even see ancient art anymore because, well, it's too many of us. The Lascaux cave system is now a World Heritage Site in France, but once it was a booming tourist attraction. These cave paintings, see, they're 17,300 years old. They're quite ancient. We can't really touch them. You can't have someone write Steve was here on it. Can't do that. Paintings that depict cattle, bison, stags, you name it. They're beautiful. They're complex, and of course, like I said, they're extremely old. So old, in fact, that the cave was closed to the public forever in 1963 after it declared human presence wasn't healthy for the art. Yeah, our dirty coffee breath would eventually cause this art to fade away, so we had to hold our breath. We gotta leave. We gotta close it off. There we go. Plus, I'm sure somebody would have snuck in with a Sharpie by now and ruined it. You know what I mean? Or like graffiti. It would have been gone by now. You know it. 7,000-year-old paintings. Yeah, protect these for another 17,000 years, please. Number 4, Surtsey Island. Another fun island. Another weird story. Here we go. When it comes to new things in life, it's pretty rare that we get a new island, right? Especially on our planet when we're losing things and melting. How lucky are we? Sure. We're even luckier that Disney didn't build a resort here first, because now scientists, they get a chance to study what an island looks like without human interaction. That's a fun little project to focus on in the future. That's cool. It's pretty cool. It's weird and scary, but it's cool, I guess. Yeah, I'm kind of nervous. I don't know. Surtsey Island in Iceland, as of right now, it's only open to a few scientists and geologists. Everybody else, beat it. Go find your own island. Get out of here. It was born from a volcanic eruption back in 1963, and scientists, they have one rule on this island. Don't talk about Fight Club. And the second rule is no seeds. Yeah, no life, no chance at life at all. Choose something else, anything else, please. One guy accidentally pooped out a tomato seed and he almost ruined the whole operation. Guy almost ruined this entire plan. What a stressful job. It's so eerie to see the oldest human history and then immediately after see a new island where humans are forbidden. It's like, we're not allowed to go and be places anymore. I'm kind of, that's not great. What are we doing here? I'm just breathing on things? I can't take a shit on this island? Number 3, Spaceman. Look, we've all been photobombed before. It's a blessing in disguise. You look back at prom photos, some dude's trying to do a moonwalk in between, his face is like melting this way. It's great. You're like, classic Jeff. It's the best. But when Jim Templeton took a photo of his daughter in a otherwise empty marsh long before Photoshop existed, and yet somehow there appears to be an astronaut in the background, well, that's not very fun, is it? That's a little bit concerning. Jim assures us that nobody was around when this photo was taken, which I of course believe, because why would you put your kid in a photo with whatever that is? That's no thank you. It's not a weird, we're not gonna go and talk to that guy. Also, the fact that this man looks like he's from space, that ought to do it. That makes him more weird and believable. What are we looking at right now? I have no idea. Kodak even got involved in the story, like Kodak. Not Kodak Black, like the company. They got involved. They confirmed this photo was not tampered with. Yeah, and that's Kodak, right? They don't lie about anything. Spider-Man leak, Kodak's like, nah, it's Andrew Garfield. Don't listen to that. So authentic. Can confirm. Number 2, nursing home spirit. This photo was taken from a nursing home resident the same night that another resident had passed away, which is an odd thing to do. Just set up a camera thing right after, like, just in case, maybe we'll catch one. Well, they did. This was back in 2015, and that night they heard a door open and close, but there were no visitors allowed at the time. So, some Kodak was coming into the picture at this point. So now there's a great amount of people who think that this image is one of 2 things. It's either the spirit of the resident that passed away, or it's the Grim Reaper. Yeah, the door opening and closing. People think that was the Grim Reaper coming in and then leaving, which is so scary. How long was he in there? Was it like 46 seconds, 4 minutes? How long does this guy operate? Is he quick? Is it like busting tables? Is he just like, all right, let's do this? Is he like Santa Claus? I feel like he's like Santa Claus. A few comments were also saying that it's comforting, this photo, to know that in the end you aren't alone. that you have someone assisting you to the afterlife? No, I'm good. I'd rather die alone than have whatever that is break into my home and closing open doors. I'm good. And finally, number 1, the Battle of Los Angeles, or lack thereof. We'll see. I don't know. This is a weird one. Of course, we have to end on one of the most unspeakable battles, photos, whatever you want to call it, of all time. The Battle of Los Angeles, otherwise known as the Great Los Angeles Air Raid, happened during World War II, right at the end of February 1942. Now, this event, first of all, took place only a few months after the Pearl Harbor attack, so I'll admit everyone's a little on edge. We're a little stressed out, we've got some hands hovering over some buttons, we're a little nervous. Sure, something like 25 enemy aircraft was apparently spotted flying over Los Angeles in the late hours of February 24th. So, air raids then went off, blackouts were put in effect. This was not a drill, right? Or was it? What was this? This thing was getting lit up in the sky. Around 1,400 shells were blasted off and 2 people had a heart attack. That's how loud it was. In total, 5 people ended up dying from this retaliation, and apparently it was a false alarm. Although many now believe that it was UFOs or aliens, and that's why we were launching stuff at it. A press conference was held by the Secretary of the Navy, Frank Knox, and he called the incident war nerves. People have heart attacks. He's like, oops, I was nervous, my bad, slipped. Little quick reaction there. Number 10, Russian Bigfoot caught on tape. The exact location of where this video was taken is still unknown. In fact, there isn't a ton known about this video at all, but what is known is that it was taken somewhere in Russia. That's about it. And people actually believe that it captures the real Bigfoot, or one of the many Bigfoots out there. This is the Russian one. They got a Russian Bigfoot. What do we all think here? I wanted to start with one of the most insane videos I could find. I think I nailed it. How'd I do? I don't know. This one comment dives in further. The user says, the title of the original video was called Chichuna, but in Russian script. The creature hops, sometimes sideways like a lemur. Of course, lemurs have tails, which make that type of movement easier. And chichunas are sometimes described as having tails, but this creature doesn't appear to have one, does it? No, it looks like a blob of scariness. I don't even know. The original footage was in all Russian and claimed to have been shot in Siberia. It also featured a boy and a dog in the foreground who didn't appear to be all that concerned, but I still believe this footage to be genuine. That's one of the top comments, so you know someone did their research. Number 9, overnight visitor. Oh, this one definitely gives me the chills. I don't like it. This video was taken from a surveillance camera that was placed inside of a couple's home. Not outside, inside. This is scary, and I hope this never happens to anybody watching this video. The footage caught something while they were both asleep, and it's one of the creepiest things that I've ever seen. When the couple woke up the next day, they were unable to find a purse that they knew was in the home right before they went to sleep. So they decided to check their security cameras, and this is what they found. As they were sleeping, a man crept in and was so quiet that he didn't wake them or their dogs up. No, he stood at the top of the stairs watching them sleep for a few minutes, which just adds another layer of ew to this whole scenario. Yeah, always check those nooks and crannies before you go to sleep, I guess. Number 8, Titanic inspection card. This inspection card once belonged to a woman named Marion Meanwell. What could possibly be creepy about an inspection card, you ask? Well, it shows how Marion was not intended to be on the Titanic, but by some turn of events, she unfortunately found herself as one of the passengers that went down with the ship. Now, the card shows that she was originally meant to be traveling on a ship called the Majestic. For some reason, the trip she originally had planned was delayed, and she instead was assigned to the ill-fated Titanic. Yeah, you can see the word Majestic is literally crossed out of her card. You know, adds to the creepy element because it shows her literal change in plans. Number 7, Norway Lights. Natural light phenomena is common in our big, beautiful planet. The northern lights, the green flash, solar eclipses, you name it. I bet those were all pretty alarming back in ancient times. Now, some of these natural events look otherworldly. They look cosmic almost. Most of the time, there's an explanation waiting, but for the mysterious glowing orbs floating over Norway, the Halsdalen lights, as locals call them, we still need some answers. Scientists have been trying to gather research, and in 2014, after many impressive light shows, their best guess is a natural battery that charges underground and then emits this light show above. Maybe this has something to do with the reoccurring lights over Phoenix. Could be the same phenomena happening, who knows? Number 6, the cool time traveler. Do you believe in time travel? If your answer is no, maybe this next one, maybe it'll change your mind or keep you open to the concept. It's a common theme in movies, Back to the Future, Loopers, Avengers. Time travel plots are fun, but they're absolute nonsense. Or are they? When we see a case like the Cape Scott story, we can't help but be intrigued a little bit. Time travel or not, this is an interesting photo. It comes from Ray Peterson's book, The Great Cape Scott Story. That book was from 1974, but the actual photo used in the book was taken over 100 years ago. And in the photo, it shows this modern-looking guy. rocking shorts, maybe jorts, who knows. He has messy morning surfer hair, dippity-doo, three-hold, you know, that kind of stuff. He doesn't look like he's from that time period at all. This also has happened more than once, like the time-traveling hipster. I don't know, I'm pretty sure it's my cousin. That looks like a guy I know. Definitely not a guy from the 1900s, that's for sure. Number 5, skunk ape. This one is exactly what it sounds like. The skunk ape was seen back in 2000, so hopefully, if it's a real thing, it's long gone. Hopefully it's dead by now. It's pretty gross. 2 photos were taken of the supposed skunk ape, and this thing looks like Bigfoot's cooler, older cousin, you know? That cousin who has a lava lamp, does kickflips in the garage in October. That kind of cousin, that's the skunk ape, really. An anonymous source sent the Sarasota County Sheriff's Department these photos. They mailed them in, which for starters, that's pretty jarring to receive. Just a creature, just Bigfoot, put it in the mail. But she claims these photos were taken in her actual backyard and that this creature was not a black bear, wasn't anything we've seen before. I personally don't think that's a black bear. If anything, it's just a really large, odd-looking dog. Those teeth alone are a red flag either way. I want nothing to do with that. Number 4, Solway spaceman caught on photo. Look, we've all been photobombed before. It's a blessing in disguise. You look back at prom photos, some dude sneezing in the background while you're, you know, having the moment of your life. It's the best, we love it. But when Jim Templeton took a photo of his daughter in an otherwise empty marsh, long before Photoshop existed, it appears an astronaut just crashed the family moment. He just had to pop up in the photo in the background. Now, Jim assures us that nobody was around, which I believe, otherwise what a weird photo to take in an empty field. I'd be like, hi, get away from my daughter. Just, yeah, 17 meters to the left, thanks. Also, the fact that this man looks like he's from space. Yeah, that makes it more believable, no? What are we looking at right now? Who is this? It's so creepy. Kodak even got involved in this story, right? Like Kodak, the company Kodak. They confirmed this photo was not tampered with. And they know everything. They made Avatar, so they know what's up. Let's run everything by Kodak from now on. Deal? Number 3, Worstead church visitor. Okay, time to get a little paranormal. We love those. Hit the lights. Back in 1975, Peter and Diane Berthelot were visiting the Worstead church in the UK. It was beautiful, right? So like any visitor does, Peter took a photo with his nice Kodak camera, right? He wants to see the truth with his Kodak. Peter took a photo of his lovely wife sitting in the spectacle of a church, but later on, once the photo was developed, somebody else was all of a sudden in the photo now. Or something, we don't really know. Right on the bench behind Diane, there appears to be a person in all white. How calming is that? Maybe it's a wedding, maybe it's their big day. We love it. When the couple went back to the church to ask about who it was, a local suggested they may have gotten photo proof of the white lady, the spirit of a healer who haunts the church. I mean, as far as surprise ghosts go, that's pretty tame. That's a pretty tame encounter. That's how it should be. Could have been a lot worse. They're like, oh, that's the demon. That's Daryl the demon. Yeah. You don't want any part of that. Number 2, Black Knight satellite. Not to be confused with Martin Lawrence's Black Knight, that's, you know, although that's pretty historical and memorable in itself, the Black Knight satellite is something that has been orbiting our planet for God knows how long. We're guessing thousands of years. Everything else on this list is quite recent, but this myth is ancient. This photo here you've probably seen at one point or another. It was taken back in 1998 during an American mission to the International Space Station. Apparently this guy has been hovering over our Earth just watching us. It's some sort of alien satellite. That's a fun theory, no doubt about it. But during a spacewalk in 1998, one of the thermal covers came loose and drifted away from the station. Could this be that cover that just floated off and wrapped itself around a rock or something? Or it could be an ancient night satellite. One of the two. And finally, number 1, the doorbell licker. Nice, we gotta end with the weirdest thing I've ever seen. This one's short and sweet. Not much explaining to do here, obviously. Does what it says in the can. Back in 2019, a man was caught on surveillance, a doorbell camera, approaching a home in a neighborhood in Salinas, California. He doesn't say much, he just shows up, doesn't drop off any package, nothing like that. He just shows up and starts licking the doorbell. Not the camera, but the actual doorbell, like the button. He must have rang the bell hundreds of times because he did this for 3 hours straight. His jaw muscles must be insane. The homeowner said in a following interview after seeing said footage, I quote, "Oh boy, that is just weird." Yeah, that's what they said to that footage for 3 hours of a man licking their doorbell. They're like, oh boy, that's weird. If that was me, I'd move. I'd be halfway packing. I'd be like, oh boy, that's weird. Grab a box, let's go. We're moving. Kicking off our list at number 10, the Pioneer's Defense. Right off the bat, yeah, look at this one. I don't have to explain why it's creepy in any way. A whole town appears to be wearing gas masks. Yeah, you could probably guess which era this is. This image was captured in 1937 by Russian photographer Viktor Bula. Adapting to new safety regulations these last few years have been challenging, no doubt about that. But in 1937, if you wanted to join the Young Pioneers, which is the Soviet version of the Boy Scouts, well, you had to wear these huge gas masks and part of military preparation. Yeah, welcome to Boy Scouts. Grab a button and then put this vacuum cleaner on your face. Enjoy. Break a leg. It's gonna hurt your back a bit. This photo is haunting. It's from the Leningrad area, and it happened while dictator Stalin was still in charge. These masks are so haunting to look at. We see them after the fact, but to see them being worn in real time in that photo, I don't know. Maybe this photo gets me because we can't see anybody's faces or ages, right? Makes you paint the picture yourself. Either way, let's move on to some clown stuff, shall we? Number 9, 1910 clowns. Yeah, they existed back then, and they were much worse. Here's a fun fact, I didn't know this, but back in 2016, a study was done, and it turns out Americans fear clowns more than they fear death. Mind you, this was at the height of the clown craze back in America, but a poll was conducted by the Morning Consult in 2016, and it shows that 42% of Americans said they were in some capacity afraid of clowns. 42%. So if this is you, you may want to skip to the next one. I'll beat you there, no problem. This photo is from 1910, and it appears to be a jolly good time, right? 2 clowns for the price of 1. Nice, what a great deal. Let's go. Now what's terrifying about this photo, I'll admit, is that the clown on the right is much larger than the clown on the left. If you have a fear of giants, well, you're screwed here, really. Nowhere you can go. Just a tall clown and a little clown. There's clowns everywhere. I don't like clowns. Number 8, Annalise Michel. If you've seen or heard of the 2005 horror film, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, this one here should ring a bell. This is the OG photo. How scary is that? Annalise Michel was a devout Catholic living a normal life with her parents in Germany. This was back in the late 1960s, but seemingly out of nowhere, she began to black out before showing strange behaviors. And when I say strange behaviors, I mean she would hallucinate and eat spiders. Stuff like that. Yeah, it was pretty scary. It was also extremely unhealthy, but ultimately Annalise claimed to be possessed by the devil, and her parents soon had to agree. Cut to 67 exorcisms later, Annalise sadly died of malnutrition at age 23 in 1976. And like I mentioned at the start of this point, her story was so widely known and shocking that it eventually inspired the 2005 horror film, The Exorcism of Emily Rose, which I have seen, and it is very scary. All real. Turns out. Sleep in fear. Number 7, the fire. This is a photo that comes to us from 2003. Not quite vintage, but still old enough. I'm 28. Yeah, where's time going? I don't know. This one came from the Station nightclub back in Rhode Island, and it shows the band Great White as they perform. Now, while this may seem like just a regular photo that somebody took on their Motorola Razr, what ensued shortly after this photo was taken is absolutely horrifying and tragic. Basically, as the band performed, there were some pyrotechnics that were set off, and they were meant to be a spectacular display, but they only ended up coming out as a disaster. See, the fireworks ended up setting all of the flammable acoustic foam in the walls and the ceiling all around them on fire. And it happened fast too, within 1 minute. Everything that was combustible ended up going in flames fast. Within 2 minutes, the entire club was fully engulfed in black smoke and people were having trouble finding exits. It was crowded, right? In the end, this fire took the lives of 100 people and another 230 were injured as a result. It has since gone down in US history as one of the worst and most deadly nightclub fires. Yeah, we look at Ball of Burning Men and think of what happened there. This is basically a 2003 version of that. More people, more flammable stuff, more pyrotechnics, and unfortunately, more deaths. Number 6, the Titanic. We all know the story of the Titanic. I mean, Olivia hasn't seen the movie, but we'll get to that later. It's one of the most famous in history, and this photo comes from just before that historic iceberg encounter. On April 10th, 1912, the Titanic set sail on its maiden voyage, heading from Southampton over to New York City. Now, the ship took a couple stops along the way, one in France and the other in Ireland, before setting off ultimately for the United States officially. Now, somewhere along the beginning part of its journey, somebody was able to snap a photo of the ship as it sailed away. Now, it's not clear exactly where this photo was taken because it's old and there's a lot of water, but it is thought to be the last photo of the ship ever before its tragic end. Considering it was only 4 days after the ship set sail that it hit the iceberg, it is likely that this photo came not too long before that terrible day. So yeah, they're probably right. This was probably the last photo. Number 5. Oroville Dam. On February 13th, 2017 in Oroville, California, the Oroville Dam, which is the tallest dam in the United States that holds back a reservoir that contains 1.1 trillion gallons of water, well, that dam's main emergency spillways were damaged. This led to the emergency evacuation of 188,000 people over concerns that the damage's emergency spillway might just fail at this point. This was all caused by torrential rain and floods in the region, which then began to reveal the extensive damage in said spillway. This photo here shows the dam releasing 100,000 cubic feet of water per second into the main spillway. This is a feat of engineering, if anything. Now, luckily, a major disaster was avoided in the situation because of quick action by those responsible, but to see it unfold and to see how fierce it is, I don't like water, or pressure, or dams, or history. Let's move on. Number 4, the lipstick killer. This is a photo that comes to us from December 10th, 1945. Now, if looking at this image gives you a weird shudder or chill down your spine, you got instincts. Nice. You've heard about this in some way, or yeah, you read the title. You know it's some bad stuff coming. This was written by a terrible person known as the lipstick killer. This photo is an image of a note that he left written on the wall at one of his crime scenes. Now, the photo comes from the apartment of Frances Brown, as just before he wrote this message, he, as you would have guessed, took her life, sadly. After this message was left, he ended up taking the life of another person because he was finally caught by police 6 months later. The message, put in the photo, reads, "For heaven's sake, catch me before I kill more. I cannot control myself." Yeah, the lipstick killer wrote that. It's the scariest thing I ever heard. It's an absolute chilling note with a horrifying backstory. A lot of killers are getting their Netflix specials now, so I'm sure it's only time before he gets one. Number 3, eruption of Mount St. Helens. Mount St. Helens is a stratovolcano located in Washington. Now, the volcano is best known, of course, for its huge and disastrous eruption on May 18th, 1980. And we have a photograph of it, and it's very scary. This photograph comes from photographer Robert Landsberg, who of course was unfortunately in the area at the time of the eruption. Now, before the eruption, he had visited the area in order to photograph and document all the changes that were happening. Didn't expect this one. On May 18th, he was within a few miles of the volcano when it did erupt. Now, since he unfortunately was located so close to the eruption, he knew he wouldn't be able to escape this disaster. So instead of focusing on the impossible, he focused on taking as many photos as possible. Just like a historian at the end of his life, really. Robert was obviously incredibly brave and dedicated, and also very smart. After snapping as many photos as he could, including this one, he then secured his camera in his backpack and covered his backpack with his body. Protected history. It's like he knew he was unlikely to survive, but he still wanted to make sure that these photos did. That's why it was so important for me to bring it in this list today. His body was found 17 days later with his backpack still underneath him. Plan did work, and his film was of course developed and has provided geologists with some really valuable insights with his close documentation of the eruption. So historically, it's a feat, but also scientifically, it's one as well. Number 2, acid drum. This photo comes to us from the inside of the house of, well, you guessed it, another terrible person. The serial killer Jeffrey Dahmer. Yeah, we all know him. This photo was taken from the inside of his home right after he was found and caught by authorities. Now, before his arrest, he was sadly able to take the lives of 17 individuals. Now, although this photo may look kind of plain, dare I say, the horrors behind it are plentiful. This shot is simple. It shows a drum full of acid that was located inside of his home. You can only imagine the horrors. I don't need to tell you what this was used for, obviously. And I can't imagine the horrors that investigators saw when they first arrived to his house. Even investigating the crimes is one thing, but to show up and see this, it's too much. Thankfully, Jeffrey was caught, and in 1992, he was sentenced to life in prison, but just 2 years later, he was killed by a fellow prison inmate. Insert Curb Your Enthusiasm music. And finally, number 1, Europe flood. This photo comes to us from the summer of 2022, as people across Western Europe experienced disastrous flooding. Now, after days of heavy raining, it ended up turning rivers that were usually normal and calm into these raging currents that ravaged the streets, and sadly left cars and power lines just being swept away. Homes too, they got engulfed and residents were trapped inside. This photo was taken in Erfstadt, which is just southwest of Cologne, and it shows how a bunch of houses collapsed due to subsidence, which is the sun sinking of the ground surface below. Now, unfortunately, these floods caused many people to lose their lives, mostly in Germany, but these were sadly dozens of people in Belgium as well, pretty much everywhere. Bigger than we thought initially, all of which was an absolute tragedy. Rescue workers worked tirelessly to help as many people as possible escape this terrible situation. I couldn't even imagine responding to this, let alone being caught up in it. That's terrible.
Starting off this list, in our number 10 spot we have the Mad Bomber. This is a photo that was taken of someone known as the Mad Bomber. His real name is George Metsky, and he was the man who terrorized New York City for 16 years while he planted explosives in public places like an absolute psychopath. I guess he was apparently angry about a workplace injury he had suffered in the years prior to his terrible crimes, and so of course the normal reasonable jump to make would be not that at all. While no one should have ever had to suffer because of these crimes, the good news is that while he planted 33 bombs and set off 22 of them, miraculously only 15 people ended up injured in the end. This photo of him behind bars is extremely eerie thanks to his creepy smile and haunting eyes. I might be the only one who feels it, but it just seems like something's off. You know? In our number 9 spot today we have the Figures of the Fire. This photo is both extremely unsettling and super captivating as it shows a scene after the Great Fire at Madame Tussauds in 1925. Of course, this wax museum is famous for the extremely lifelike wax figures that are created and find their home there, so you can only imagine the aftermath of the fire. These lifelike figures with missing heads and appendages, burnt skin and hair, and just clothing in disarray. Seeing this photo for the first time without knowing the story behind it was definitely a bit of a confusing and terrifying experience. The heads on the ground really freaked me out for a full 5 seconds. As scary as it is, I'm glad to hear it's not real and just some creative casualties rather than what this photo appears to be at first. In our number 8 spot today we have the Spectre. This is a photo that was taken in England in 1963, and it became known as the Spectre of the Newby Church. That is, of course, because of the ghostly figure that can be seen in the photo. I personally am always a little suspicious of ghost photos. Some are certainly more convincing than others, but Photoshop in 1963 wasn't exactly as accessible and easy as it is now. This photo is said to have been taken by Reverend K.F. Lord inside of the Newby Church, which is located in North Yorkshire, England. Of course, I mean, like many of us are going to do, people were really skeptical of this apparition and just believed it was a well done case of double exposure, which, to be fair, is entirely possible. The Reverend continued to swear up and down, however, that the photo was not doctored, so at this point, there's no proof to prove either side, and it's just a game of he said, she said. So, what do you guys think? Apparition caught slipping, or is the Reverend just making it up? In our number 7 spot today, we have the Tsar Bomba. This is a photo that was taken on October 30th, 1961. It was quite the Halloween spooky fright that year, as this is said to be the largest and most powerful nuclear weapon ever created and tested. The hydrogen aerial bomb was developed in the Soviet Union by a group of nuclear physicists that were under the leadership of Igor Kurchatov. The bomb was dropped by parachute and was detonated autonomously. While this test was meant to be a secret, it turned out to be less than well kept, as it was obviously a huge explosion that was detected by United States intelligence agencies. A secret US recon aircraft called Speedlight Alpha was there monitoring the explosion, and it got so close that it had its anti-radiation paint absolutely scorched off. The photo clearly shows the bomb as it exploded, and it is said that this bomb was 5,000 times stronger than the ones that were dropped on Japan during World War II. That's not to say that those ones weren't strong, because they were absolutely devastating. It's just an example to show how large this one really was. In our number 6 spot today we have the 3 Jacksons. On August 21st, 1934, 3 fearless acrobats known as the 3 Jacksons, Charlie Smith, Jewel Waddick, and Jimmy Kerrigan, all performed a routine on the edge of the Empire State Building, which is when this photo was captured. It is said that these 3 toured as an acrobatic trio, and this stunt the photo captured was done at 1,245 feet. According to officials from the Empire State Building, it is said that this was the first time the stunt was attempted, and to this day, it has never been done again, which makes a lot of sense. While this photo is absolutely incredible and is such a testament not only to the trust that they shared but also their abilities as acrobats, I don't know who in their right mind would try to recreate this. We already have one. I think we can just all be happy with that. In our number 5 spot today we have the Gentleman of Rehi. This photo shows the Gentleman of Rehi, and that is not a gentleman and instead is the world's oldest surviving diving suit. It is an absolutely terrifying sight, but also an important pillar that allowed for this kind of technology to developed to what it is today. The suit dates back to the early 18th century, but it came to find its home at the EERIE Museum during the 1860s after it was donated. The suit was initially designed to allow people the ability to check the hull of ships without having to bring them into dry dock. The old gentleman is made mostly of leather with pitch thread used to stitch the seams. From here, the suit is sealed with more pitch, and then to create the waterproof coat, it is covered in a mixture of mutton tallow, tar, and pitch. Of course, underwater pressure increases dramatically, and this is why there's also wooden framework in the hood in order to keep it from collapsing under the pressure. At the top of the hood, there is an opening for a wooden air pipe. The air will be pumped to the diver, then it can be released from the suit through a pipe on the backside. Of course, this means that the suit wasn't completely watertight, so divers could only go under for a short period and couldn't dive very deep because there was only so much pressure the suit could take, but still, the suit was far better than having no suit at all. In our number 4 spot today, we have ectoplasm. This photo is said to have been taken in 1910, and it shows a medium in the middle of a spiritual seance. I don't know about you, but a 1910 seance sounds like an absolutely terrifying time. This photo is said to be catching the moment that ectoplasm appears out of the mouth of the medium. When we're talking about the occult and the paranormal, ectoplasm is a viscous substance that exudes from a spiritual entity, or sometimes the earthbound medium who is connected to or communicating with the spirit. It is said that this substance can take the shape of a face or a hand or a complete body, and it's usually seen in a darkened room during a sort of seance, and this is the way that the paranormal can physically manifest themselves in our world. So basically, what I'm saying is that this is supposed to be the moment that an evil entity is making themselves known in our world. Thankfully, at the end of the contact with the spirit, the ectoplasm will usually disappear as it returns to the entity, so it hopefully didn't stay around long, but this photo sure is something. In our number 3 spot today, we have the isolator. There are tons of strange inventions from the past. We have entire lists and videos dedicated to the strange inventions, there's so many. And while this is one that can be added to the list of bizarre inventions, it can also be added to the list of creepy ones as well. This photo shows what was meant to be a sort of anti-distraction contraption from the 1920s. Listen, I can get easily distracted, so sometimes I need a little help, but this thing really takes it to a new level. It essentially makes it impossible for the person to look at anything other than what is directly in front of them, or, you know, breathe. It seems like a contraption that requires an oxygen tank hookup probably isn't going to be the best anti-distraction device. In fact, I think that's probably more distracting than anything. Honestly, I'm such a good procrastinator that even with this thing, I still wouldn't get my work done. Thankfully, this device didn't stick around or gain much popularity, and now it is just a terrifying relic of the past. In our number 2 spot today, we have the Great Manta. In 1933, a New York silk manufacturer named A.L. Kahn was on a nice little vacation in Florida when he honestly accidentally caught something remarkable. His anchor line, by mistake, caught onto a giant manta ray. After a struggle and several hours, Kahn was able to get this actually enormous fish ashore. This monster was somewhere between 5,000 to 6,000 pounds and was 20 feet and 5 inches in width. For reference, there are other giant manta rays, but they usually grow to be around 13 to 14 feet wide, not 20 and a half. This photo is showing a taxidermy version of the fish, which Kahn used to bring around to exhibitions to show off his accidental catch. In an article from December 10th, 1933 of the St. Louis Post-Dispatch's Sunday magazine, Kahn is quoted as saying, "Fishing is a lot of fun when you catch the fish, and sometimes it's fun even when you don't, but when the fish catches you." And finally, in our number 1 spot today, we have the advertisement. This is a photo that comes to us from the time of World War II, and it shows a very terrifying kind of ad. The sign reads, "These men didn't take their Atabrine," and at first I had absolutely no idea what that was. Turns out that Atabrine was actually the first synthetic form of a drug which was used by the US military to fight malaria in the South Pacific during the war. It is estimated that as many as 2/3 of the troops fell ill with malaria. This sign is said to have been posted outside of a military hospital in New Guinea and was meant to serve as a warning for those who didn't take the medicine, warning that the skulls on top would be the fate that awaited them. Perhaps a little dark, but creative and likely effective nonetheless. At the very least, the ad is definitely quite clear.
Number 10, Amelia Earhart.
An American aviation pioneer and celebrated figure in the early 20th century, Amelia Earhart was the first female aviator to fly solo across the Atlantic Ocean. Notably, in 1932, she became the first woman to fly solo non-stop across the Atlantic Ocean, covering a distance of over 2,000 miles from Newfoundland, Canada to Northern Ireland. Beyond her aviation achievements, Earhart was a prominent advocate for women's rights. She encouraged women to pursue careers and goals that were traditionally considered to be male-dominated. Earhart was also an author and a popular public speaker, which I wish I could do, and she wrote several books about her experience in aviation and women's issues. In this photo, what seems to be a normal photo of Amelia is actually the last photo we have of her before she went missing. She may have survived her round-the-world attempt only to be later captured by Japanese forces. According to a newly discovered photograph, and according to the new History Channel documentary, the photo is found in a National Archive file as it is shown Earhart alive after her plane fell low on fuel during her mission. The photo depicts a woman believing to be Earhart and a man who looked like her navigator, Fred. A Japanese ship can be seen in the background, carrying what appears to be her plane, as her fate has been debated for decades and has sparked several conspiracy theories. What do you guys think? Or are people just hopeful? Number 9. Volcano. We all love a good nature tour or park hike, but for this man, David Johnston, he really loved the nature of volcanoes and geology, and ultimately pursued his education in the field. He was working with the U.S. Geological Survey at the Cascades Volcano Observatory in Vancouver, Washington, and he was assigned to monitor the activity of Mount St. Helens, a stratovolcano that had been showing recently a lot of activity. This photo is when he was doing his research on the earthly giant, but tragically on May 18, 1980, Mount St. Helens erupted explosively, triggering a massive landslide and a pyroclastic flow. David Johnston was stationed at the observation post on the ridge known as Coldwater 2, about 6 miles north of the volcano. He radioed in the now famous message, "Vancouver, Vancouver, this is it!" to his colleagues at the USGS headquarters, alerting them to the eruption. Regrettably, Johnston's post was directly in the path of the advancing pyroclastic flow, and he perished in the eruption alongside with many others. His body was unfortunately never recovered, and he was only 30 years old. Number 8. The 1986 Challenger. I love space, and I think space is really amazing and cool, as so did these guys, the crew members of the Challenger: Francis R. Scooby, Michael J. Smith, Ronald McNair, Ellison Onizuka, Judith Resnick, Gregory Jarvis, and Christina McAuliffe. The Challenger mission was unique because it included Christina, a civilian schoolteacher who was selected to be the first private citizen to fly in space as part of NASA's Teacher in Space program. However, the Challenger suffered a massive disaster when the failure of an O-ring seal in the right solid rocket booster. Cold temperatures on the morning of the launch weakened the O-ring's elasticity, allowing hot gases to escape and damage the external fuel tank, leading to an explosion that was witnessed by millions of people around the world, and it was a devastating blow to NASA and the space program. Following the disaster, the Space Shuttle program was suspended for over 2 years, and significant changes were made to the shuttle's design and launch protocols. After its investigation, the disaster also led to a renewal focus on the importance of safety in human spaceflight. Number 7. Menendez Brothers. We're all fans of something, whether it's art, music, or sports, and for the Menendez brothers, they would be so excited to see that they happen to be in the photo card. But the most disturbing part of this photo is the fact that these two killed their parents before the photo was even taken. They went on a 6-month spending binge with their money. The case was so shocking to the media, including how after the deaths occurred, the brothers went to watch James Bond's License to Kill and tried to use it as an alibi. How a week prior their mother confided to her therapist that she was worried that her sons were psychopaths, and how one brother bought an entire chicken wing restaurant with the parents' money after they had passed away. Their father was an executive in the entertainment industry, and both went into private schools, and the older brother Lyle was briefly enrolled in Princeton. After 2 deadlocked juries, LA prosecutors retired the brothers in a courtroom that did not allow cameras, and the new jury found them guilty on 2 counts of the first degree. They were sentenced by the judge to life in prison. Number 6. Aquino. Filipino people have been known to fight resistance against imperialism and oppressors, as that seems to be all of our history to be composed of, and that is the truth. And for Ninoy Aquino, he was opposing threat as the political activist against the long dictatorship and assailant of the martial law, Ferdinand Marcos. He tried to run for president in 1973, but then Marcos declared martial law in 1972, preventing him to run. Benigno Aquino, or as we know by his nickname Ninoy Aquino, was imprisoned by the Marcos regime for speaking out against him, where he was locked in prison and tormented for 7 years. It wasn't until he suffered a heart attack did Marcos' wife Imelda allowed him to go to the United States to get treatment, only under the condition that he does not come back home to the Philippines. But Aquino knew that his love for the people and the Philippines was more important, as there were many people wrongfully prosecuted or just be found dead on the street for protesting against Marcos. He did plan to go back, and before he arrived to the Philippines, he warned reporters, "Hey, this might be the last time you ever actually speak to me," and he was right. In this photo was the photo before before he left the plane out towards the Philippines airport. He kept saying he had a bulletproof vest on, but the assailant shot him in the head. There were countless reporters that day that knew something was going on, only for them to be all shocked to see his body on the ground. There's even footage of his assassination online, and his death sparked an outrage throughout all of the Philippines asking for justice. But of course, the United States always has to get involved in something, and they were able to get the Marcos family out of persecution from the very people he tormented and controlled for years. Number 5. Tyler Hadley. Everyone likes a good party selfie, including Tyler Hadley, who we can see here drinking a party cup with some friends. But what they don't know is that if they walked into the master bedroom was the killed bodies of his parents that he ended moments before the party. Tyler allegedly decided how he wanted to commit the crime a few weeks prior to committing them. He often told a friend exactly what he was planning to do at the time, noting that having a big party after a parricide had never been done before. Shortly after noon, Tyler wrote on his Facebook wall, "Party at my crib tonight. Maybe." Around 60 people attended the party at that night, and several had alleged to have noticed the smell of dead bodies. Gross. During the party, Tyler apparently told several people about what he had done. Tyler went on a short walk with a friend and Michael Mandel and confessed the crime. After returning to the party, Mandel discovered the bodies of Blake and Mary Jo in the master bedroom. Mandel did not leave the party immediately. In fact, he had continued to spend hours with Tyler and even took a selfie with him, which is what we see. 4 hours later, Mandel left the party and called the local crime hotline to report the incident, which is pretty smart on his end, because if he did something, then, Tyler would have done something to him. News of the crime was then spread by word of mouth, and Hadley was arrested early in the next morning. Number 4. Tank Man. When it comes to revolution, all it takes is one person. After all, a single grain of rice can tip the scale. The Tank Man photograph was taken on the morning of the 5th of June, 1989, the day after the Chinese government had violently suppressed protests in Tiananmen Square. An estimated 10,000 civilians were killed in the massacre following weeks of a student-led demonstration in Beijing and beyond against the communist regimes and the suppression of basic human rights and freedom of expression. The image captures a lone man standing in the middle of the Chang'an Avenue just off the square, facing down a column of 4 slowly advancing Type 59 tanks of the Chinese army in a defiant protest. The identity of the Tank Man still remains anonymous, as people don't know what happened to him after, but he has been noted as a notable figure in the stance against militia harm to the people. Number 3. Jolie Callan. When it comes to love, if you know something is off, listen to your gut and be safe first. Unfortunately for Jolie, she only left one memory to a friend that if something ever happened to her, they know who the cause was. In 2015, 18-year-old Jolie Callan was hiking with her ex-boyfriend Lauren Bunner when he photographed her on a cliff before he pushed her off of it. The 20-year-old killer nearly escaped justice by claiming he was on the autism spectrum in court. This is the exact photo before he pushed her off. Bunner later called the cops and said, "I just want to turn myself in for the crime of my ex-girlfriend that happened just a little while ago on Cheheha Mountain." Later that evening, on August 30th, 2015, police found her body still wearing her backpack. Cops believe that he had lured Callahan, who still wanted to remain friends with her former boyfriend, there to kill her because she wouldn't take him back. The court heard him bragging to cellmates about killing the 18-year-old, saying if he couldn't have her, no one else could. Number 2. Omeg. If you're lucky, you may have had some cute outing photos with your family and friends when you were younger, and this particular photo seems like an ordinary day with a young girl and her dad, but unfortunately it was actually moments before an explosion incident caused by the real IRA, or the Real Irish Republican Army, a provincial Irish Republican Army splinter group who opposed the IRA ceasefire and the Good Friday Agreement signed earlier that year. The explosion killed 29 people and injured about 220 others. The red Vauxhall Calvier containing the bomb, can I say bomb? The red Vauxhall Calvier containing the explosion, this photograph was taken shortly before the explosion, and the camera was found afterwards in the rubble. The man and the child in the photo both survived, and the injured survivor, Marion Radford, described hearing an unearthly bang followed by eeriness, a darkness that had just come over the place, then screams as she saw bits of bodies, limbs on the ground while she searched for her 16-year-old son, Alan. She later discovered he had been killed yards away from her after the two became separated just minutes before the blast. And finally, number 1, Andes. Personally, one of the most creepiest photo, and it actually made me feel pretty uncomfy with this one. It seems like a cool crew cut photo of just a bunch of dudes, when in reality these are the survivors of an Air Force Flight 571 crash in the Andes. Pilot Ferradas had flown across the Andes 29 times previously, and on this flight he was training a co-pilot, Laguara, who was at the controls. As they flew through the Andes, clouds obscured the mountains, and the controller in Santiago, unaware the flight was still over the Andes, authorized him to descend to 11,500 feet. The rugby players on board joked about the turbulence at first until some passengers saw that the aircraft was very close to the mountain. That was probably the moment when the pilots saw the black ridge rising dead ahead. After the crash, of the 45 people on the aircraft, 3 passengers and 2 crew members of the tail section were killed when it broke apart.
The survivors had little food, only 8 chocolate bars, a tin of mussels, 3 small jars of jam, a tin of almonds, a few dates, candies, dried plums, and several bottles of wine. Eventually their friends made an agreement that if they ever died, they would offer themselves for them to eat, and so they did. The group survived by collectively deciding to eat flesh from the bodies of their dead comrades, and in the photo you can see on the right, a spine. At the end, 8 people were rescued and they lived.
Starting off with some geography, we got Lake Nyos. How can a lake kill 1,700 people? Well, though it sounds too insane to be true, it did indeed happen. Located in West Africa, the lake itself is deceptively beautiful. However, on August 21st, 1986, a mysterious cloud burst from the lake. It flooded towards the village and suffocated 1,700 people and animals. Nothing survived the event. The reason this happened is because beneath the water there is a pocket of magma that leaks carbon dioxide into the lake. The CO2 stays dissolved in the water due to the pressure of the 650 feet of water on top of the magma secretions. Crazy, so kind of like a pop bottle with an invisible lid. Until one day, that lid popped. On that day, the lake abruptly depressurized and the CO2 exploded into the air, causing the devastating event. Today, pipes are used to siphon the CO2 out from the bottom of the lake in order to prevent this from happening again, but imagine when it did happen, it must have felt like some kind of magical grim occurrence. For sure. Number 9, the Salem Witch Trials. If you follow me on MA, you just know how much I hate the Salem Witch Trials. I hate them so much, okay? It's an event in history that is so inconceivably stupid, it's hard to believe it actually happened. The Salem Witch Trials occurred in Massachusetts between 1692 and 1693, where more than 200 people were accused of witchcraft and 20 were put to death. It all started because the daughter of Reverend Paris, Elizabeth, who was 9, and his niece, Abigail Williams, same age, started having fits. Another girl, Ann Putnam, age 11, started having them as well. The supernatural was blamed and soon the girls began accusing everyone they could, mostly people the town didn't like. Basically, if you confessed and you wanted to be saved, then you weren't executed, but if you were accused and didn't confess, you were killed. The paranoia was so bad that once you were accused, you couldn't escape this guilt they put on you. It was insane. But after the paranoia finally subsided, the colony admitted that they probably made a mistake and compensated the families. Like, yeah, oops, might have gotten a little carried away there. Wow, whew, I got excited, sorry guys. Here's some money. The Salem Witch Trials today represent what happens when paranoia rules a courtroom and the whole thing still beguiles the world even 300 years later. Number 8. Unsinkable Sam. On a happier note, this is the kind of story that makes people believe that cats have 9 lives. Unsinkable Sam was the nickname for a cat who survived several shipwrecks during World War II. His tale begins aboard a German warship called the Bismarck. Among the 2,200 soldiers was a black and white cat that somehow snuck aboard. One day, the Bismarck was decimated during an attack, and while the HMS Cossack was looking for survivors, they saw Oscar the cat, name of the time, seeking refuge on a plank, like Jack from the Titanic. They hauled him aboard, but then several months later, the Cossack would be decimated. That's shipwreck number 2. This time, it was the HMS Ark Royale who spotted him, and was then dubbed the name Unsinkable Sam. And then, shipwreck number 3, months later, as you can guess, the Royale was torpedoed, and once again, Sam was saved by the HMS Legion of the British Royal Fleet. Finally, this seafaring feline retired to land and later died in 1955. Number 7, Nellie Bly. Nellie Bly is a woman right out of a Jules Verne novel. In fact, you would think so if she hadn't met the man himself. In 1889, Nellie Bly took on a record-breaking voyage by traveling around the world in just 72 days. Her means of travel included a train, a steamship, a rickshaw, horse, and donkey. Her goal was to beat the fictional record set by Verne's hero Phileas Fogg in his 80-day Odyssey. An event like this already appeared as a myth to the men of the time. Her editor at the New York World nearly refused to send her because her gender would make the trip impossible. No one but a man could do this, he told her. Very well, she replied. Start the man and I'll start the same day for some other newspaper and beat him. He backed down and eventually Nellie was on her way, turning fiction into reality. Number 6, the Black Museum. No, I'm not talking about the Black Museum episode of Black Mirror, but honestly, not too far off. People have done some pretty vicious things to their enemies, there's a long list, but imagine turning your enemies into a permanent dinner guest. Because that's exactly what Ferdinand I of Naples actually did. Though everyone thought he was going to be a great king, he actually ended up being pretty psychotic. He would invite his enemies over for dinner, and while they gorged on pheasant, he would take them out, either the old-fashioned way, or literally throw them out of a window. He would then retrieve and dress the bodies and stage them. He called it his Black Museum and would invite new acquaintances to view it so they would know exactly who they were dealing with, so not to mess with him. What a psycho! Number 5, Sir Adrian Cotton de Walt. Love that name. There are going to be a couple unbelievable events on this list from World War II, so just a heads up. But truth be told, the war itself is kind of hard to believe. Sir Adrian Cotton de Wart was not only a man who survived the impossible once, but he made a career out of it. He wasn't like your Blackadder general in the back with a pipe. This dude was on the front lines tossing grenades with one arm because he already lost the other. He served in the Boer War, World War I, and World War II. He survived being shot in the face, skull, hip, leg, ankle, and ear. One eye and one arm short, this enthusiastic war hero dove into the bloodshed again and again. He was seen pulling pins out of grenades and throwing them with his one good arm during Battle of the Somme. But even as a 60-year-old man, he was still a beast. His plane got shot down in April 1941, he crashed it into the Mediterranean, survived, swam all the way to shore, then he got captured by Italian soldiers, thrown into a POW camp, then he escaped, eluded capture for 8 days, but unfortunately the lack of Italian looks gave him away. He was released 2 years later, and Churchill was such a big fan of him, he made him his rep over in China. He ended up passing away peacefully at age 83. Despite hundreds of close calls with death. Number 4, Simo Häyhä. This is actually kind of a plug for a short film I'm looking to raise funds for. Check out my Instagram to learn more. But his story is incredible and it's so unbelievable. Simo Häyhä's story sounds like something straight out of a movie, except it actually happened. A humble Finnish farmer who became the Soviets' nightmare in World War II. He is widely regarded as one of the most accomplished and skilled snipers in history. The Winter War began in Finland in 1939 after Russia decided that it was time to regain some territory. They thought it was going to be easy. But soon they came to fear the man who would be known as the White Death. He was trained as a sniper at a young age, didn't want to take human lives though, so he just became a farmer, but the lives of his countrymen were at stake. The Winter War lasted just over 100 days, and within that time, Simo hit as many as 500 men, his personal best being 40 confirmed hits in one day. Some people estimate that it was over 800 people. In March 1940, he was hit in the jaw by a counter sniper, leaving him in a coma for 11 days. But when he awoke, however, the Russians surrendered. That is poetic justice. Number 3, Alexander the Great. How did this guy exist? Was he the son of Zeus? The case is so convincing that even Alexander believed it himself. During the 15 years of his conquest, starting from his first victory when he was 18, Alexander never lost a battle. He was so prolific in battle that his strategies are still studied to this day. Before Alexander entered Egypt, they had been under Persian rule for just over 200 years. Through his incredible prowess and lightning-quick decision-making, Alexander defeated them. Egypt was so happy they even claimed him as their pharaoh. While he was in Egypt, however, Alexander decided to make the long trek to visit the shrine of Zeus Ammon. According to the man himself, he was guided there by ravens, and it even rained during his journey, which was interpreted as a blessing. When he got there, the priest named him a son of Zeus. Now, if that doesn't make this guy sound like a myth, then I don't know what will. Number 2, Boadicea. Boadicea is the Morrigan in my mind. She is Xena, warrior princess. This woman was so ferocious, she was called the scourge of the Roman Empire. Yeah, that's right, this queen took on the Roman Empire. At the time Rome was invading the south of Britain, Queen Boadicea ruled the Iceni tribe of East Anglia, along her husband King Prasutagus. Though her early days remain mostly a mystery, she remains among the canon of heroes who defended the British Isles. She was fearsome to behold, with flaming red hair and a gaze so sharp it could cut glass. She and her husband fought against the Romans until his death, after which the Romans drove straight to take her on. They attacked her daughters publicly, which, like Mother Bear, not a good idea, after which she toured in a chariot rallying the people in rebellion. She sacked 3 Roman cities and took no prisoners. She annihilated the 9th Legion when she took out their entire relief force. Sadly though, Boadicea fell after a vicious battle, but her name echoes in the halls of heroes. And last but not least, Richard, Saladin, and the Third Crusade. Just the Crusades in general are just unbelievable. Never in history have two rulers been so equally matched. Currently I'm reading Warriors of God, Richard the Lionheart and Saladin and the Third Crusade by James Rustin, and the fact that everything I've read so far isn't just the next Game of Thrones novel astounds me. These two never met because Saladin believed that kings should not go to war if they had met, but because they were fighting over the Holy Land, war was kind of inevitable. But while Saladin did not engage in warfare, Richard dove right in the middle of everything. They both had such incredible admiration for each other that in the middle of battles, they would send each other gifts. I don't understand. You killed my men. You killed my men. Here's a fruit basket. Literally happened. And another example, during the Battle of Jaffa, Richard's horse ended up being killed, and Saladin was so impressed with him that he sent him 2 new ones. 2! On top of that, Richard had taken off half of his armor before he had leapt ashore to fight. So he was basically half naked. Eventually Saladin tried to have him assassinated, but Richard was so ferocious in battle that everyone feared him. The dude was pretty much a human bulldozer. The 2 assassins ended up waking up the camp because they were fighting about who should take the guy out. Number 10, the Papal Schism, or Schism, who knows. Suffice it to say that the Pope is a pretty big deal in the Catholic realm of religion, pretty much the CEO of loving Jesus the most, but it is also a position of immense power, which means there is a lot of competition for the next one in line. Usually there is one reigning pope at a time, but at one point there were 3 because there was so much rivalry. Between 1378 to 1417, there wasn't just 1, not 2, but 3 rival popes, each with their own following of Sacred College of Cardinals. After 70 years of Pope Clement V living in Avignon, France, the Roman populace wanted a pope that was at least Italian. Can we just get an Italian? When Pope Urban VI was elected, he proved so hostile that a bunch of cardinals went back to France and elected their own pope because the other one didn't count. They didn't like him. He thought he was voted in because people were afraid. They probably were. They elected Clement VII, who lived in France, so now there were 2 popes. 2 popes, as you can guess, had a disastrous effect on the church, so people were like, okay children, if you can't play nice, either both of you resign or we will pick one for you. The popes refused to concede because they were like, no, I want to be pope. So cardinals arranged the Council of Pisa and elected a 3rd pope, because that'll solve everything, Alexander V, who succeeded John the 23rd. John formed the Council of Constance, then was kicked out of papacy by said council. Then the Roman pope, who is now Gregory XII, resigned the Avignon pope, who was dismissed. Eventually, the whole schism ended when Martin V was elected in 1417. It's just so confusing. I feel like I want to vomit. Too much popes.
On number 9, Bone Wars. The early days of paleontology were intense and pretty cutthroat. Since this was a relatively new science with a plethora of things to discover, so many researchers set out to learn and find as much as they could, and this created a lot of rivalries since everyone wanted to gain notoriety for their findings. The competition was intense, but nothing could ever measure up to the rivalry between Othniel Charles Marsh and Edward Drinker Cope. These 2 rival paleontologists did everything in their power to throw each other off or to disprove them, and the lengths that they went to accomplish this was almost unbelievable. Both of them took off to Montana and Utah to dig up as many fossils before the other guy did, but they just didn't stop at digging. They each hired spies and saboteurs to get in the way of others' work, and they even tried to pass off fake skeletons as well. This is where we got the Brontosaurus controversy. One of the scientists had discovered the dinosaur known as Apatosaurus, and so the other one had to one-up him and introduce his own species named the Brontosaurus. The only problem with it though was the fact that it was a skeleton of the same dinosaur but with an intentionally placed skull from another dinosaur. It was a fake. This back and forth was intense in the scientific community and made for some pretty unbelievable stories.
Number 8, the Man in the Iron Mask. It is kind of crazy that this story actually exists, and it could be nothing. It could have been some dude who had syphilis who didn't want anyone to see his But the world remains convinced that he was more than he seemed. The movie, The Man in the Iron Mask with Leonardo DiCaprio, John Malkovich, has one theory that the man was actually the twin brother of the king. But the true identity of the Man in the Iron Mask remains a 350-year-old mystery. But it happened! In 1669, a man was arrested and put in prison for 30 years and was held in the infamous Bastille prison in France until he died in 1703. He was never seen without a black velvet mask or an iron mask. It's also described. No one knew who he was or for what possible reason he was put in there. The likes of Voltaire and Alexander Dumas tried to speculate who he was, and more recently Paul Saninio, a professor at the University of California, believed he was Eustache Dauger based on prison accounts and the guard. Dauger was in the prison at the same time as the masked man and was once transported in a chair covered so people wouldn't see him. But still, nothing has been confirmed, and I just think it's really cool and I like the speculation.
At number 7, Valentinian I. You know when you see someone get really mad and a lot of the time there's that one vein in their head that just pops out while their face turns red? Well, that thing unalived someone once. That's right, a person once got so unbelievably angry that they died. Roman Emperor Valentinian I was known to be a pretty hot-headed guy, and during his monarchy he had rivals in Danube called the Quadi tribe. Valentinian was very invested in this rivalry and they were in constant conflict with one another. In November of 375 CE, Valentinian received a note from the Quadi tribe demanding that they be left alone in peace as they supplied new troops to the army of Rome. On top of that, some Quadi troops also claimed that this whole feud between them and the emperor was because of the Roman forts that were built on their land. They even claimed that because of this, they weren't obligated to follow any of the terms of the Roman treaty and that they could attack whenever they wanted. As you could imagine, hearing all this stuff from his rivals really ticked off the emperor. He got so mad that he started yelling at Quadi agents, and his yelling was so intense that a blood vessel in his brain ended up bursting and he passed away shortly afterwards.
Number 6, the Great Emu War. I thought this event was a joke for like a very long time, but like many on this list, it actually happened. It all started in 1932 when a large emu population began devastating farms. Many of the farmers were ex-soldiers, and after the devastation persisted, petitioned for military aid to defeat the pests. Keep in mind that emus can grow as tall as like 6.5 feet and have really sharp claws. They're fierce. We didn't know how fierce until the Minister of Defense, George Pierce, deployed troops and expected to eradicate the pests, I don't know, very quickly. But they were in for a surprise. They vastly underestimated these killer cunning birds, as they soon proved impossible to hit with machine gun fire. They just like barreled forward like Superman getting hit by bullets. Like they would, like it didn't even matter. They would get hit and then just keep running. They were so fast that even their vehicles couldn't keep up with them. It's so funny. Within a week, the military gave up and they killed only like 50 to 200 emus out of like 20,000 of them. George Pierce earned the title of Minister of the Emu War. What a way to go. Eventually they did try again later that November, which resulted in 284,700 deaths of emus between 1945 to 1960. But dang, that is some pest control. But we all know that girl on TikTok who has like emus and she like puts her hand out when they try and hiss at her. They needed her. She would have just like dummied the whole population and they would have followed her like the Messiah.
At number 5, atomic tourism. If you could do anything or go anywhere while on vacation, what would you do? Maybe go on a cruise or visit a tropical destination, but how about go and watch bombs get tested? Well, if you were around in the 1950s, then atomic tourism might have been one of your options for entertainment while on vacation. In the 50s, the US was expanding its arsenal of nuclear weapons due to the threat of the Soviet Union and their nuclear firepower. Because this was such a big thing, the Tourist Bureau of Las Vegas decided to profit off the US military's weapons testing and make an entire attraction out of it. Because testing for these nuclear weapons took place in the desert in Nevada, a tourist site was set up a safe distance away so that people could watch these weapons be detonated, as well as have a beautiful view of the Nevada horizon. People would bring picnics to watch the nuclear weapons, and at nighttime they would throw parties while they waited for the next explosion. It's such a weird tourist attraction, but then again, the 1950s were also a weird time anyway.
Number 4, Agent 355. So they are actually making a movie inspired by this one because of course it would make a great movie. Move over 007, there is a new agent in town and I smell an excellent film legacy brewing. After a hasty retreat made by George Washington leaving more control in British hands, he needed to come up with a stealthier way to retaliate. Thus, the Culper spy ring was born. This intelligence operation was so good at keeping secrets, some of the identities of the spies were never revealed, especially the identity of Agent 355. Not even Washington himself knew who was working for him or who was 355, but we do know that they were a female agent, a spy of expert skill. It was because of her that the head of England's intelligence, Major John Andre, was arrested. Notoriously handsome and debonair, 355 could have been any of the women that fawned over him at parties, gathering his secrets. One secret in particular was his plan to sell West Point to the British. After documents pertaining to his ordeal was uncovered, he was arrested and condemned. But as to who would be directly thanked for this capture was unknown. The only other suspected fact about her was that a female spy was reportedly killed on a prison ship in 1780. Of course, there are theories regarding her real identity, but Agent 355 was so good at her job that who she was and what else she did would be taken to her grave.
At number 3, Chrysippus. You know how when you laugh really hard, you start gasping for air and your stomach starts to hurt from tensing up your body so much? Well, this once killed someone. A Greek philosopher named Chrysippus actually died from laughter. In the 3rd century BCE, the philosopher laughed so hard because he saw his donkey eating figs, and then he kicked the bucket, so to speak. According to science, death by laughter can occur because of asphyxiation, because you just can't breathe because you're laughing so hard, or through an aneurysm because of the tension from laughing. What's so wild about this is the fact that this wasn't the first time in history that death by laughter has happened. It is said that Cleopatra's father died the same way because he was laughing at the death of her husband, and a 5th century Greek painter met the same fate because he laughed too hard at one of his own paintings. And a Danish audiologist passed away in a similar fashion in 1989 because he saw a funny scene in a movie that raised his heart rate so much that he died.
Number 2, the first marathon. The Battle of Marathon is one of the most famous Greek battles in history, and it's also epic, and I also can't believe it happened because it's so cool. Back in 490 BC, the Greeks faced off against the invading Persians on the plains of Marathon. It was a victory that would go down in history as a testament to courage and excellence. But it wasn't only the battle itself, but a man named Phidippes whose actions were so insane, some people think it was a myth. He was sent to enlist the help of Spartans before the battle, so he ran to Sparta but stopped in Athens first. The total distance was 240 kilometers, like there and back. I can barely make 4 kilometers, imagine 240 kilometers on foot. He wasn't just like a basic guy though, he was what was called a hemerodromos, a sacred day-long runner in the military. They were known for covering incredible distances by foot, even foregoing sleep. They would most likely have consumed figs and cured meat, like that's it. His journey inspired the marathons run today, and even some have tried to make the exact trek he did. Meanwhile, it's a struggle for me to even do like a half-hour workout at the end of the day.
And finally, at number 1, Robert Liston. Robert Liston was probably the worst doctor in the history of medicine because he messed up so bad it is unbelievable. This surgeon in the 1800s performed a surgery that had a 300% mortality rate. So he went in to help someone and ended up killing 3 people as a result. Liston was performing a simple leg amputation, but was working so fast that he ended up cutting off 2 of his assistant's fingers during the procedure. Both the assistant and the patient ended up passing away after contracting gangrene. Now you're probably asking yourself, well, what about the 3rd person? You said this had a 300% mortality rate. Well, let me tell you how the 3rd person perished. During the procedure, Liston swiped near an elderly doctor with one of his blades. Thinking that he had been cut, the doctor started freaking out and went into shock. The stress was so much that the doctor ended up having a heart attack and passed away. So in the end, Robert Liston killed 3 people trying to save 1 life and failed miserably.
Number 10, we will get out of lockdown. I don't know, maybe? We'll see. I think so. I'm starting this one as number 10 because I literally cannot believe we are here. I just got my 2nd dose and it was officially 2 weeks last Friday, so hugs are a-coming, and I remember feeling even a few months ago that this would never happen. Researchers estimate that over 9.5 billion doses of the vaccine will be administered by the end of 2022. That means that for weddings, school, restaurants, libraries, work without masks is going to be in our future. With the Delta variant still at play, there is the possibility of other precautions being put in place, but still, if not by 2022, then eventually. The vaccines can protect against it, so as long as we keep doing our part to keep each other safe, we are on the way, babies! I'm gonna hug so many people! Maybe even you, or you, Chris. Number 9, the Sagrada Familia. One of the largest and longest construction projects will finally come to an end. Antonio Gaudi's masterpiece began construction in 1882 and has had nine architects take over since. It is called the Sagrada Familia Church and is located in Barcelona, Spain, or Badalona, as they say in Vicky Cristina Barcelona. I love that. Badalona? Jordi Folli and his team will be the last people to ever work on it. The pure extravagance and luxury of this building is overwhelmingly breathtaking, but why on earth has it taken so long? Well, the original architect died in 1926, there was the Spanish Civil War, the original project was destroyed, and lack of funding. The majority of the project was privately funded and subsidized. The designs that Gaudi laid down are also incredibly complex, with each layer and brick containing intricate details. He wanted to build the highest church in the world, and that it will be, with the central Jesus Tower reaching 172.5 meters. But finally, after 150 years of construction, the church will finally be complete in 2026. If everything goes well. You never know. As we found out in the last 2 years. You just never know. Number 8, the triple Jovian eclipse. Some really cool things have already happened these past few months, and there's plenty more to come, so don't you worry. The next Jovian eclipse is set to happen in 2032. What is that, you ask? Well, 3 of Jupiter's largest moons, Io, Ganymede, and Callisto, will align across the planet's surface like a couple of cool space polka dots. Yeah, we'll call them that. Jupiter has 16 moons in total, and the 3 mentioned are among the biggest in its orbit. The last time this happened was in 2004 and was caught on the Hubble Space Telescope by some miracle. The event happens so quickly, and this time scientists are hoping to capture the event in sharp detail, so stay tuned. Watch your Google. Number 7. We might live forever? I don't know. Put down the Botox and hold the collagen injections. There might be another way. Thanks to the SENS Research Foundation, we may find a way to turn back the clock when it comes to aging. Dr. Aubrey de Grey is an English author, biomedical gerontologist, and mathematician who believes that one day, aging might be stopped by medical intervention. His research involves attempting to find a way to treat the disease of aging by repairing damage on a molecular level. One of the main causes of aging are dead cells, or senescent cells. Once the cell stops multiplying, they release a whole stew of chemicals that cause inflammation and the breakdown of surrounding tissue. Now usually our body fights these off because they are recognized as imposters and they are forced to self-destruct. But they accumulate with age. If they are successful at finding a way to diminish these cells, it could mean that they could make a 60-year-old feel and look 30 again. Pretty exciting stuff. Not without controversy though. MIT Tech Review challenged molecular biologists to disprove Gray's claims for a chance to win 20 grand, but nobody has yet. So... Number 6, NASA's New Horizons spacecraft. Humanity is pretty freaking astounding, and our reach is stretching further and further out into the universe every day. Right now, the Voyager 1 and 2 are currently exploring interstellar space, but NASA just launched yet another incredibly exciting space adventure. NASA's New Horizons spacecraft is currently out in space at a distance of 50 times the distance between Earth and the Sun. Scientists estimate that by the 2040s, it will finally surpass Voyager 1 and 2 in interstellar space, and who knows what it will find. New Horizon gets its power source from a single radioisotope thermoelectric generator, which is super cool how it works. Essentially a kind of nuclear battery that sources its power through the natural radioactive decay of plutonium dioxide fuel. What? I'm not a scientist, so that blew my mind. I'm not quite sure if I understand it. Do we understand it? Let us know in the comments. The decay rate is high enough to create a reliable amount of heat so the engine can just keep going and going and going. So it just opens up a future of discoveries, and I'm excited. Number 5, nano robots. Does anyone remember the first Agent Cody Banks movie where the villain installs these evil nano robots and ice cubes, but they're not evil, he just uses them for evil? Initially the tech was used for good, right? To help clean up oil spills, for instance, but that's where my mind went when I learned this. According to the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, MIT, they have created cell-sized robots that can navigate and detect issues in their environment. Now imagine that the environment is actually your lungs or your liver or your veins or your eyes. This gives scientists hope that a future where disease detection doesn't take months of waiting in line, just mere minutes. The aim of these nanobots is to help detect infection or disease within the body before it even shows. I'm not sure how I feel about tiny little robots floating inside me, but if I would be cool, I think I have to ask myself this question. If I'd be okay with Miss Frizzle shrinking a bus down and going through my nose, would I be okay with that? Then I might be okay with this. Number 4, we might meet aliens. So I know they said that the random monoliths that appeared around the world were made by artists. Convenient. Artists are essentially aliens. We're weird. We are so weird. It was 2020. We couldn't handle anything else. But in truth, meeting aliens may not be something that just happens in Doctor Who. In fact, Jamie Matthews, astrophysicist and professor at the University of British Columbia, said, and I quote, "By the year 2118, extraterrestrial life won't be news but historical fact." I recognize that some of us might not live past 100, myself included, but that statement still implies that it could happen within that time frame. The most terrifying thought about that will be how we react to them, though by alien life it doesn't necessarily mean humanoid alien creatures with oval heads. It will most likely mean that we will find a specific kind of anaerobic bacteria, like kind of what we might find in Venus with the phosphine and everything, if you know what I'm talking about. But according to the Pentagon report, if I'm being honest here, I'm not so worried about the aliens. I'm more worried about how we're gonna react to them. Will it make us more humble, fearful, arrogant? Will this be the War of the Worlds scenario? God, I hope not. I hope we all get along and we're just a big happy space family. Unlikely. Before we land on our top 3, if you're still with us, give us a like and comment on what you're looking forward to the most. Also, if you're new to the Hive, give us a subscribe. We'll love you forever. Number 3, a visit to Mars. So in the next few years, we are putting boots on the moon. 2024 is gonna be a big year. It has been over 50 years since astronauts last set foot on the moon, and the Artemis program is set to accomplish this. But what's more exciting is what's coming next. This trip is also a kind of test drive for life support systems that will hopefully extend the trip to months, even a year. If that goes well, then the next step is Mars. NASA's InSight mission is now on Mars, and its stay has been extended in order to measure how life on Mars, such as quakes and dust devils, will affect human visitors. It's also a test for how useful solar panels will be on Mars, and if it's an effective form of energy. But its journey to and from the planet is the precursor to manned missions to Mars, so depending on how the next year goes, we might be around to see some astronauts on Mars. If they don't bring Mars bars, I'm gonna be really upset. That's all I'm saying. Number 2, space elevators. Sounds so cool. Satellites, rocket ships, and now space elevators. Oh baby. Tokyo-based Obayashi Corp has boasted that they have plans to build one by 2050. China is in the race, ambitiously trying to beat them by 5 years. The idea of having a space elevator is considered the holy grail of space exploration, even though it sounds like a concept straight out of Willy Wonka. It will essentially be a long cable extending from the planet's surface with electromagnetic vehicles traveling along the cable. To keep it from crashing like a beanstalk back to Earth, it will be attached to a massive counterbalance on one end, like an asteroid. In fact, exactly like an asteroid. That's a straight up quote from NASA. They want to move an asteroid into place for this purpose. I don't know, I feel like that's really ambitious. For some reason, I think NASA's plan may take a little longer, but it is in the works, folks. A mini elevator called STARS-Me, devised by Japanese physicists, will simulate on a small scale what conditions on an elevator to the stars would encounter in a weightless environment, so who knows? Who knows? Let's go. Number 1. AI surpasses human intelligence. AI. Artificial intelligence. Should we be scared? I don't know. Would Mary Shelley be shaking her book at us if she saw how far we've come and are going? From apps that anticipate our needs to robots doing TED Talks, AI is here, and it ain't going anywhere. In May and June of 2016, Yale University and Oxford's Future of Humanity Institute took a poll of hundreds of industry leaders in order to answer
Just one question. Will AI surpass human intelligence, and if so, when? Their findings? Well, it looks like the consensus is that AI will be as capable, if not more, than humans in most tasks by 2060. Add another 76 years and experts think that AI will take over all human jobs. That sucks. My first job was at Wendy's. Imagine a robot serving me? They pretty much already do. The results are based on 352 experts who responded, though I'm pretty sure there is some flux in that. We've been wrong about a lot of things before. Maybe we are about this one. Who knows?